You wanted the top off,
It doesn't
right?
matter.
That's why you left them off, so they'd look better on the camera. So
yeah.
there you go.
But that's
tops
okay.
off.
You can eat your burgers and talk about the Joni Mitchell and stuff, whatever.
Neil Young.
Yeah, whatever you want to talk about.
Actually, okay, so I don't know how much made it onto the.
Probably quite a lot.
Okay, but I'll just read a little bit. Will you take me as I am? My answer is Joni, no. I wouldn't take you as you are. But as you were, maybe way back when in the day when you actually were challenging a vocal cords to some reasonably melodic stuff. Stuff like Both Sides Now. Stuff she kind of disowned. So that's written. It's not a autobiography. It's written by Michelle Mercer, who's maybe a bit too much of an enthusiast. Here's something written about Neil Young. Neil Young Nation. Maybe it should be Nations because this was written by Kevin Chong, and he's a big fan, as in fanatic, of Neil Young, and he traced it. I'll show.
Well, a lot of people are really big fans of Neil.
Yeah, they are.
There's one of your burger tops. I'll have to go get you another one.
Thank you. Actually, I'd better eat those now.
No, it's fine.
But the other one's going to flip off too.
Yeah. Well, I can hold up the book and you can just talk.
Well,
Here.
I was going to show a map in there.
It doesn't matter.
He was taking a tour
This
with
map?
the three of his friends. Exactly right. So you
Okay,
can see
you eat.
it's Neil Young Nation. Okay, so he's going across the Canada, much of Canada, at least Quebec and the Atlantic provinces, and much of the United States, actually, at least Midwest to the west.
Are you going to be okay without one top?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm just afraid of losing the cabbage is, in many ways, the most important part of it. It'll be the healthiest part, at least for cancer. I think cruciferous veggies are supposed to be quite effective against various forms of cancer. And I'm in remission now. I want to keep it that way as long as possible. So it should have been called Neil Young Nations. And the third book I better review is First Time. Something like a very ghost-written, I'm afraid, autobiography of Cher. And no last name with her. For a while she went with Cher Bono, I guess. And then Cher Bono Allman. And then she decided to lose the name. Just like these, she lost the guys, huh? Dwayne Allman, by all accounts, was pretty much of a ne'er-do-well. It wasn't the greatest singer either. Not bad on the, what was the old Hammond B3 organ who was playing? But I have to say, looking at the Allman Brothers, the two drummers, the original bassist, Dwayne Allman's older brother, I think he was older, Greg Allman. Guitar, not a slide guitar. The other guitarist, Dickie Betts. If there was a weak link to that group, it would be Dwayne Allman.
I'll get you a new top.
Excellent, thank you.
You keep talking about Neil Young.
Yeah. Sorry about talking with my mouth closed, but I gotta get this stuff eaten or the wind blows it away. So, Kevin Chong was trying to duplicate some of the travels that Neil Young made across significant parts of the North American continent earlier in his life. Winnipeg to Toronto, stopovers in Thunder Bay. Then it was Fort William, Port Arthur. Kind of like Canada's version of the Twin Cities. I think how basic that would apply to Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. Frankly, not that far away from Thunder Bay. I had to check to see if Minneapolis, St. Paul is on Highway 61. Highway 61, which went near where Bob Dylan hailed from, Minnesota, Hibbing, Minnesota. I don't think he went right through it. And that should be reminding you of Bob Dylan's classic album, Highway 61 Revisit, released in 1965. Anyway, Highway 61. If I'm not mistaken, heads north of New Orleans. Goes the full width of the United States and heads towards Thunder Bay. So Thunder Bay is kind of like, even though it's a little off center, kind of the center of Canada. In the same way that St. Louis might be seen as the center of the United States. I suspect Highway 61 goes south. Near St. Louis. So, back in the day, Neil Young was a bit of a, what the Germans would call a Wandervogel. Only Wandervogels in German culture refer to people who hike around. I don't know if Neil Young was much into hiking. More into driving around. And he tended to drive around in a couple of hearses way back in the day. One he called Mort. And the second one he called Mort II. Mort the second. So it's a thing that enabled Neil Young to track down Stephen Stills. He didn't have a dress. He run across Stephen Stills in the walk places in Thunder Bay, Ontario. And I think he was also with Rick James Darrow in Toronto. It's amazing how much talent gravitated around those two guys, Stephen Stills and Neil Young. The most talented guy, I think, was Van Dyke Parks. He wrote the lyrics to Heroes and Villains with for Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. But early on, Stephen Stills had Van Dyke Parks and Peter Torkelson, later Peter Tork of the Monkees, in a group. I don't know if it's the three of them or whether they had some sort of rhythm section back of them. I wouldn't accuse Peter Tork of being overly talented, but Van Dyke Parks is amazing. Amazing guy. I first heard him playing organ back in the Birds. It was either late 66 or early 67 when we got hold of the album as kids. My family, my sister actually. And a song called 5D. But no. Young had run across Stephen Stills or vice versa in Thunder Bay. They kind of went their way. Neil Young headed for Toronto. Stephen Stills eventually ended up in Los Angeles. So Neil Young decided to track Stephen Stills down. He didn't know his address. I think he knew he was in LA. So he's driving around the streets. I don't think it took many days. Might have been the next day or something like that. Streets of Los Angeles. Los Angeles is big now. It was pretty big back then. And Stephen Stills spots this spots Mort 2, the Canadian plates. So he figures who'd be weird enough duck to be driving around something like that in Canada down here. So they hooked up and they formed Buffalo Springfield. And the rest is not really history because Neil Young kept on blowing off dates. So apparently they were supposed to be on something like some sort of TV show. Neil Young didn't show up. I think they were supposed to be the Monterey Pop Festival. And there are rumors that David Crosby joined up Buffalo Springfield, but no, he performed with them on stage because Neil Young didn't show up. What a guy. So Kevin's song kind of touches on it. Neil Young, look at his long career, is committed to not committing himself. He dumps women right, left, and center. He hung with his wife Peggy for quite a while. Dumped her for Daryl Hannah, apparently. I can't see him getting dumped. I don't know if he's ever been dumped. Maybe. Dumps women. Dumps band members. He dumps fans. So, the worst he ever did was dump Jack Nietzsche. Jack Nietzsche, he might have ruined himself with drink and whatever all those. But Jack Nietzsche was a big guy on the LA studio scene, along with Phil Spector, Glenn Campbell, what was his name? Tommy Tedesco. I don't know what his first name is. Hal Blaine. On and on. He's part of the wrecking crew, I guess. Leon Russell, the keyboard player. And I gather that poor Jack Nietzsche threw that all aside so he could produce Neil Young, or work with Neil Young on Neil Young's first album. And Neil Young was trying there. It's not his best album. His writing chops weren't that good. Right after he quit Buffalo Springfield. But they were trying for some production value. After that, Neil Young kept on saying there are two approaches to rock and roll. There's a Beatles approach and there's a Rolling Stones approach. You should have really said there's a Bob Dylan approach, which is basically you just fly by the seat of your pants. The Beatles, you don't fly by the seat of your pants. And when it comes to listening to stuff, I'm not talking about lyrics, I'll go back to the Beatles every time, listening to stuff over Bob Dylan. Every time. The big trouble is that Neil Young is putting his lyrics together. He doesn't do the Bob Dylan thing. Bob Dylan didn't fly by the seat of his pants.
For the lyrics.
For his lyrics. Neil Young flies by the seat of his pants with his lyrics. I'll give you an example. This is right after I really got into Neil Young. I think his 72 album. So I bought a 70 album after the gold rush. I bought a 69 album. The Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, and that's the album for me. And then, so I think it might be the first song on his album, the big selling one, Harvest. Out on the Weekend, or whatever it's called. I think I'll pack it in and buy a pickup and take it down to LA. Okay, yeah, it's caught my attention. Pack it in and buy a pickup. You got the pack and pick, this kind of sound. Find a place to call my own and try to fix up. Fix up what? Are you fixing junk or? And start a brand new day. Cliche, cliche, cliche. What are you talking about? You see how he just go, oh, I've got this great idea. Great ideas aren't worth much unless you put them into a little bit of context or stuff like that. Wow. And I can remember I kind of like that sound on that thing. Bum, bum. It's kind of one of Neil Young sounds. But that album really faded on me. I borrowed it from a friend. A friend lent it to me. We didn't go say, hey, can I borrow that? He said, you know, we used to exchange albums. So I'm listening to it and I'm going, I'm never going to buy this album. I finally did when I was buying CDs. But it was 30 years later or more than 30 years later. I thought, okay, I became a bit of a completist or something like that. And that's not the only song on that album where he's just like shucking us, really, when it comes to lyrics. You know? Why would I buy that when I could buy a Bob Dylan thing? At least when Bob Dylan was cooking some of his stuff. Before he burned out or whatever happened to him. Any number of times. Now, Neil Young he's committed to lack of commitment. Now, why is he? You know, Kevin Chong doesn't talk about it much. But you know, some stuff creeps into Neil Young stuff. It's important. You know, like Britt Ackland talks about Rod Stewart being 5 minutes?
You have 10.
Okay. Talks about Rod Stewart being cheap. And you listen to Rod Stewart, so often in his songs he'd be singing about, oh, do I spend money to pay for a stamp or something like that? And you're going, geez, you know, maybe Rod Stewart's a little bit, well, Britt Ackland says he's a bit Scottish. And I guess I can talk about it a little bit because I've got some Scottish ancestry, you know, like Scottish people have got a reputation for being a little bit tight-fisted with money, and to a large extent, it's something to be proud of, not ashamed of. But Rod Stewart, it shows through with the songs. Jackson Browne has a bit of reputation for being a pounder. I don't know, Joni Mitchell is one of the ones who's Daryl Hannah, another, kind of a little bit unstable. I don't entirely trust them, but I do know that you'll run across every so occasion to Jackson Browne. Things like, sometimes we forget that we love each other and we fight for no reason. Or there's another song much later where he's talking about fighting. Is he talking about putting his fist through the wall or something like that? I don't know. So you just kind of wonder. Anyway, Neil Young. Sometimes when you're looking at the lyric sheets for Cinnamon Girl, the ending of it, which maybe should have been the bridge, but he just didn't bother with the third verse. It's some of the lyric versions have, "Ma, send me money now. I'm gonna make it somehow. I need another chance. You see, your baby loves to dance." But the ones that are more accurate are, "Pa, send some money now. I'm gonna make it somehow. I need another chance. You see, your baby loves to dance." I don't think his mom had much money. His mom was dumped by his dad. I knew about Neil Young's dad significantly before I knew about Neil Young. It'd be about 3 years before. I can recall reading a sports story written, I think it's about hockey, written by a guy called Scott Young. He was Neil Young's dad. He was a bit of a journalist and a bit of a, I guess you could call him a novelist or something like that. But he dumped his wife, Neil Young's mom. He dumped Neil Young. I don't know if he sent much money up to him. Neil Young's mom was a bit of a TV personality. She headed out to Winnipeg. I don't know if she had family there. They were in Toronto, in the southern Ontario for a while. I think the place where he came from was Omimi or Omimi. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He spent some time there at least. Apparently that's the town in North Ontario, which isn't that far north in Ontario actually, that he sings about in Helpless. I always thought it was Thunder Bay, but what the heck. At any rate, up until I read this book by Kevin Chong and his interpretation, I don't think it's a misinterpretation. He says Omimi or Omimi, however you pronounce it. Or mispronounce it. I suspect it's an indigenous word, and almost invariably it's going to be mispronounced. So, Neil Young, committed to not committing. So he'll jump around. He signs up, for example, in the 80s, early 80s with David Geffen. Geffen finally sues him for not putting out stuff that's representative of Neil Young. And I'm going, David Geffen, are you that stupid? Well, I think he kind of got away with it. Neil Young eventually did his 5 records with David Geffen and moved away. But eventually moved back to Geffen, at least for a while. But Neil Young basically doesn't do what's characteristic of him. You do some sort of stupid thing, and then another stupid thing, and another stupid thing, and then another stupid thing. Eventually he'll do something where he's kind of pushing himself. But he's basically just there to dump on the fan. I don't know why he's so abusive of the fans. I don't know. I think he's got this idea, like he's just going to wing it. But lack of commitment. Committed to lack of commitment. And it's because of his dad dumping him when he was a young pup. He spent the rest of his life not committing to other people. And frankly, I think it's not just a fear of commitment. I think it's wanting to wreak revenge on other people. W.H. Auden, Winston Heward, not Winston, once wrote, "Those to whom evil is done do evil in return." But so often in this world, we're not in a position to do evil to the people who've done evil to us. So often, I'm afraid, it's we wreak vengeance on people who have nothing to do with the evil that's been done to us. So it's a classic sort of thing. Boss picks on a guy, comes home, picks on his wife picks on the kids pick on the dog. And that's what I'm afraid Neil Young is doing. So you listen to that, Neil Young. Back in the day, America's answer to the Beatles appeared really early. It appeared late 66, early 67. It's really North America's answer to the Beatles. The album came out the same year, as I recall, same year as Sgt. Pepper's. It's Buffalo Springfield's second album. It was 60% Canadians. Drummer, bassist, Neil Young. And Stephen Stills contributed one great song to that album, Bluebird. It goes through many changes. Not quite as impressive as the song that he wrote and produced and performed on, called Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, off the Crosby, Stills and Nash's first album. But it's an impressive song. But Neil Young has 3 stone cold classic killers on that album. He's never even come close. He's never put out one album where he's had 3 stone cold killers on. He's close maybe with his first album, or second album, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, where he had Cinnamon Girl, Cowgirl in the Sand, and Down by the River. But this stuff is competing with the Beatles, including lyrically. And it's Neil Young who's churning out the lyrics on Mr. Soul. Expecting to Fly, lyrics aren't as good as Mr. Soul. And the lyrics on Broken Arrow. He's really trying, and he's a young pup. The sky was the limit for these guys. If they'd kept on going, steered clear of dope, and if Neil Young hadn't been afraid of commitment, if they'd kept that group together, Bruce Palmer, he had his problems with dope, I think, they would have creamed the Beatles. Stephen Stills is a way better, not a better vocalist than Paul McCartney, but a way better instrumentalist. He can pretty well improvise on banjo. He's got such control of it. He can improvise. He could probably play bass solos. Some of the best bass work I've ever run across been by Stephen Stills on other people's stuff, Joni Mitchell stuff, a couple of songs of hers. Improvise electrical guitar. Improvise on acoustic guitar. You don't hear people who improvise on acoustic guitars. You can go crazy on that. Improvise on piano. Improvise on organ. And Neil Young, I mean, people in this one book, the reviewer was saying, Joni Mitchell, her music's great, like alternative tunings. She has no sense of rhythm with her guitar. We'll deal with it in the future. Take